أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي بسم الله Alhamdulillah, indeed all glory and praise is due to Allah. We glorify and praise Him when we ask Him for help and forgiveness. In Allah we seek refuge from the evils of ourselves and from our wrongdoings. He whom Allah guides shall not be misguided, and he whom He misguides shall never be guided. I bear witness that there is no true God except Allah alone without any partners, and I bear witness that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his abd and messenger. Today we are going to start, inshallah, Surah Nur. Surah Nur gets its name from the very famous verse number 35 of Surah Nur, in which Allah talks about Nur ala Nur, which inshallah we will explain when we reach this verse. It is not the subject matter; it's just this verse which talks about Nur Allah Nur, that its surah gets its name from. As we have already discussed, that the names of the surahs were mostly given by the companions. Very few were given by the Prophet ﷺ. Most of them were given by the companions, and many surahs have different names. Some are related to the subject matter, others are not related to the subject matter. It's just some word with which the surah starts, or some important verse or word which comes in the middle of the surah. Surah Nur is a Madni surah and has 64 ayahs in it. And this surah was revealed after the Battle of Trench, the Ghazwa Ahzab, which happened in 5th Zilhajj, fifth year of Hijrah, 5th year after the Hijrah. The Battle of Trench was fought, and this was in this battle around 10,000 men of the enemy had surrounded and put siege to Medina for around 30 days. And this was a very difficult time in the life of Prophet Muhammad and the newly developed Islamic society. But because of extreme moral strength and discipline of the people of Islam, of the believers, eventually the Battle of Trench was won by the Muslims, and it was declared by the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ that after this battle, the kuffar will never be able to take offensive against the Muslims. So it will be the Muslims who will take offensive now. So this was a battle which made it very clear to the kuffar that they will not be able to subdue the Muslims with the help of their superior numbers or their superior military power, armor, and weapons. Or they knew that the Muslims were united against them very strongly, and that's why they decided to change their strategy, change the tactics, and they decided to create disunity within the Muslim society and break the moral strength, which was the hugest characteristic feature of the Prophet ﷺ in the Islamic society, by targeting the family of the Prophet ﷺ himself. So the Prophet ﷺ and the most famous and frontline Sahaba were targeted on the moral front, and they were slandered and maligned, and to drop the morale of the new Muslim society and to break the unity of the Muslims. So a fifth column of war strategy was deployed, very cunningly and with a extreme skill. It was carried out, and that's why most of these surahs which were revealed after Ghazwa Ahzab, or the Battle of Trench, it was Surah Ahzab and then Surah Nur. These specifically target to strengthen the moral strength of moral front of the Muslims. So they have commandments for the Muslims. Generally, all the Madni surahs have different injunctions of Sharia in it. We know that in the Makki surahs, the general topics are Tawheed, Risalat, Akhirat, and very little is said about the Sharia laws or the commandments and the prohibitions. But in the Medinan time, because the Islamic society, the principles of Islamic society and Islamic character were being laid down, so there is a huge number of ayahs which talk about the commandments, what is allowed, and prohibitions, what is not allowed in the Islamic Sharia. So in these ayahs, since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was laying down the commandments of Islamic Sharia, so the psychological event which took place as a result of the um, as a result of the change strategy of the enemy to target the moral strength of the Muslims, the Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tried to strengthen the moral front of the Muslims or the Muslim society, and commandments related to parda were revealed in both these surahs, Surah Ahzab and Surah Nur. Surah Ahzab came immediately after the Battle of Trench, after when the Prophet ﷺ married Hazrat Zainab bin Jahash, who was his cousin as well, daughter of his aunt, paternal aunt Umaima. And then Surah Nur came at the time after when a cylinder was targeted at Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha, who was the wife of Prophet Muhammad and daughter of Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq. So the ayahs of Parda were specifically revealed after the after the Battle of Trench in the fifth year of Hijrah, because in order to protect the women who were being targeted by the enemies, in order to malign and break the moral and unity of the Muslims. So, in order to protect the Muslim women and the Muslim society, these surahs were revealed as a commandment, and Allah knows best. So, we are going to go through the background or the context of Surah Nuh, as I have explained when it was revealed. Let's read a little bit about what is the background, historical background of the Surah Nur. So, after the victory of Badr, we know that Ghazwa Badr took place in the second year of Hijrah. The Islamic movement began to gain strength, that by the time of the Battle of Trench, it had become so strong that the combined forces of the enemy, numbering over 10,000, failed to crush it, and ended the siege of Al Medina after 1 month. It became apparent to both parties that the war of aggression which the disbelievers had been waging for several years had come to an end. The Holy Prophet himself declared, after this year, the Quraysh will not be able to attack you, now you will take the offensive. When the disbelievers realized that they could not defeat Islam on the battlefield, they chose the moral front to carry on the conflict. It cannot be said with certainty whether this change of tactics was the outcome of deliberate consultations or it was the inevitable result of the humiliating retreat in the Battle of Trench, for which all the available forces of the enemy had been concentrated. They knew it well that the rise of Islam was not due to the numerical strength of the Muslims, nor to their superior arms and ammunition, nor to their great material resources. Nay, the Muslims were fighting against fearful odds on all these fronts. They owed their success to their moral superiority. Their enemies realized that the pure and noble qualities of the Holy Prophet ﷺ and his followers were capturing the hearts and minds of people and were also binding them together into a highly disciplined community. As a result of this, they were defeating the mushriks and the Jews both on the peace and on the war front, because they lacked discipline and character. As we have already discussed, as we have done many Makki surahs already, especially Surah Muzammil, we have discussed that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala paid a lot of focus in the initial 13 years of Makkah to develop the character and strengthen the character of the Muslims. So there was a lot of focus on self control and emotional regulation. And as a result of that, all the diseases of the heart, the moral problems of the Muslims, they were suppressed, and the virtues of characters were shining. And these virtues of character were essential for the very difficult struggling phase of Medina, when the first Islamic civilization society was laid down by the Prophet Muhammad SAW. This strength of character was the fundamental ingredient which was required for building the foundation of the Islamic society. So we must pay attention towards what actually caused the Muslims to be a force to reckon with in the time of the Prophet Muhammad SAW. It was not their numbers and their superior military power, it was their strength of character, their emotional regulation, and their self control which made them unbeatable. So let's keep this in our mind. Because later on, when the foundation of the Islamic civilization was laid for the first time in the history of mankind in Al Medina, it was a huge challenge for the very fresh and new and young Muslim society to face all the war tactics and old strategies of the cunning people of cunning old well seasoned kuffar. But they prevailed because of the moral strength they had. So my dears, it is very important for you to realize that the weakened um, uh, Muslim strength of today, though we have the numbers and the resources, but the the weakness of the Muslim civilization and society has its roots in the very weak moral character of the Muslims. You might say that you are talking about morals and morals. What does it mean? We have talked about in Surah Muzammil that what are the diseases of the heart, the ethical problems, the moral problems, and then self control. We talked about in Surah Muzammil that you have to make a conscious effort to remove the diseases of the heart, like hypocrisy and shirk and pride and arrogance and procrastination and riyah, and all of these things which are called the diseases of the heart, and they make your heart blackened, as a result of which you cannot follow the commandments of Allah to the best of your ability. And as a result, when you're unable to follow the commandments, as a result, the whole, not only one person and one household falls down, but the whole society is degenerated. So it is as we study the Quran and with different surahs of Makki and Madni surahs, we will see how the young Muslim society, because of their character strength and unity, because of the strength of their iman, they were able to prevail against severe odds. So, under the above mentioned circumstances, the wicked designs of the disbelievers led them to start a campaign of maligning the Holy Prophet ﷺ and the Muslims, in order to destroy the morale that was helping them to defeat their enemies. Therefore, the strategy was to attain the assistance of the hypocrites, to spread slanders against the Holy Prophet and his followers, so that the mushriks and the Jews could exploit those to sow the seeds of discord among the Muslims and undermine their discipline and unity. So hypocrisy was one of the major issue in during the Madani phase of the Prophet Sallam's life, because they were hypocrites in the Medinan society, and they created a huge number of challenges for the Prophet ﷺ and the new Muslim society to face. So pride and arrogance was one of the major issue of the Makkan society, and hypocrisy was one of the major issues of the Medinan time of Prophet ﷺ. The first opportunity for the use of the new strategy was afforded in Zilqad of 5th Hijri, when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ married Hazrat Zainab, daughter of Jahash, who was the divorced wife of his adopted son Zaid bin Haris. And the Holy Prophet had arranged this marriage himself in order to put an end to the ignorant custom which had given the same status to the adopted son, that was the right only of the son from one's own lineage. The second cylinder, and as a result, Surah Ahzab was revealed. So the second cylinder was made on the honor of Hazrat Aisha Razitala Anha, the wife of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu in connection with an incident which occurred while he was returning from the campaign against Bani Mustalik. As this attack was even severer than the first one which was launched against the Prophet ﷺ at the time of his marriage with Hazrat Zainab, and was the main background of Surah Nur. We shall deal with it now. So, um, the wives of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ were being targeted and they were being slandered, and the Prophet ﷺ was his character was being targeted, which was causing a lot of uh, discouragement to the Prophet ﷺ. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing everything, being omniscience, he countered these attacks of the hypocrites and of the enemies, and used these psychological events to lay down the social moral um, uh, principles of the Islamic society and deal with them in a very cool and calm way. Uh, One of the leading character of the cylinder which was targeted on Hazrat Aisha Radhiyallahu Anha was the hypocrite Abdullah bin Ubay, who played the part of a villain in this attack. He belonged to the clan of Khizraj and was one of the most important chiefs of Al Madinah. The people had even intended to make him their king before the Prophet ﷺ migrated there, but the scheme had to be dropped because of the changed circumstances. Though he had embraced Islam, he remained at heart a hypocrite, and his hypocrisy was so manifest that he was called the chief of hypocrites. He never lost an opportunity to slander Islam in order to take his revenge. So Abdullah bin Ubay was one of the member of the two clans, two tribes of Medina. We know that Medina was called Yasrib before the Prophet ﷺ migrated to Medina, and these two tribes, the Aus and the Khizraj, were in battle with each other for a very long time. So basically, the tribes in Medina were generally the Arab tribes Aus and Khizraj, and there were many small Jewish tribes there settled in Medina as well. And those Jewish tribes, the people, they used to create unrest, and they used to earn out of it. Unrest between these Arab tribes and make money out of it. And they were reason behind many fights between Aus and Khizraj. So what was happening that for years, almost for a for a hundred for 100 years, the fighting between Aus and Khizraj carried out, and as a result of which all the senior members of these tribes were assassinated. So now the command of these tribes had come in the hands of comparatively young people, around 40 plus minus 40 years of age. And Abdullah bin Ubay, was one of the older persons of Khizraj, and he was aspiring to be the king of Medina before the Prophet ﷺ. The people of Medina took pledge at the hand of the Prophet ﷺ, and he came to Medina and became the head of the state. So, although he became a Muslim, because that was the current trend, everybody was converting to Islam, he became a Muslim, but at heart he remained extremely resentful towards the Prophet ﷺ and turned into a hypocrite and caused damage to Islam and Muslims and the Prophet ﷺ at every turn. One day, a dispute. So the main theme, according to the main theme, what happened is that in Shaban of around 6th Zilhajj, after the battle of Trench and 5th Zilhajj, and what happened was that the Holy Prophet learned that the people of Bani al-Mustalik were making preparations for a war against the Muslims and were trying to muster other clans for this purpose. he forestalled and took the enemy by surprise. So instead of waiting for them to come and do the offensive, Prophet ﷺ paid them a surprise attack. After capturing the people of the clan and their belongings, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ made a halt near Moresi, a spring in their territory. So while they were coming back with captives, they just the caravan, it just stopped at a place where there was a water spring. One day, a dispute concerning sharing water from the spring started between a servant of Hazrat Umar Raitala Anhu and an ally of the clan of Khazraj, which developed into a quarrel between the Muhajirin, the immigrants, and the Ansar, the Muslims of Medina. The local Muslims of Medina were called Ansars, and the immigrants who had come from Makkah to Medina were called the Muhajirins, but was soon settled. This, however, did not suit the strategy of Abdullah bin Ubay, who was a hypocrite, who also had joined the expedition with a large number of hypocrites. So he began to incite the Ansar, saying, "You yourself brought these people of the Quraysh from Makkah and made them partners in your wealth and property, and now they have become your rivals and want domination over you. If, if even now if even now you withdraw your support from them, they shall be forced to leave your city." Then he swore and declared, "As soon as we reach back Al Medina, the respectable people will turn out the degraded people of Makkah from the city." So this declaration was made by Abdullah bin Ubay, and he wanted to do some mischief. When the Holy Prophet ﷺ came to know of this, he ordered the people to set off immediately and march back towards Medina. The forced march continued up to the noon next day without a halt on the way, so that the people became exhausted and had no time for idle talk. So the Prophet ﷺ made them so tired that they forgot about all these bad, evil strategies that they were thinking about. Through his wise judgment and quick action, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ averted the undesirable consequences of mischief maker Abdullah bin Ubay, who later found another opportunity for doing far more serious and greater damage by engineering a slander against the Hazrat Aisha, which merely propelled the young Muslim community into a civil war. If the Holy Prophet ﷺ and his sincere and devoted followers had not shown wisdom, forbearance, and marvelous discipline in dealing with it, in order to understand the events that led to the incident of the slender, this event, which was targeted at Aisha Anha, is called the slender in history. I cite the story of Hazrat Aisha in her Hazrat Aisha's own words. So she says, whenever the Holy Prophet went out on a journey, he decided by lots to which of his wives would accompany him. So, as we know that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had almost 13 wives. Some other narration says that he had 11, and Allah knows best. Different numbers are mentioned in the different Sirah books. These were generally political marriages, and these were only allowed specific to Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. In Islam, more than 4 marriages is not allowed for any Muslim. But Prophet ﷺ was allowed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do these political marriages for the reason of unity and peace. So every time he went on an expedition, he draw lots. Draw lots means that he wrote the names of that the different names of all his wives were written, and one of the was chosen blindly which one is going to accompany him on the expedition. So this was kind of drawing lots. So accordingly, it was decided that Hazrat Aisha should accompany him during the expedition of Bani al-Mustalik. On the return journey, the Holy Prophet halted for a night at a place which was the last stage on the way back to Medina. It was still night when they began to make preparations for the march. So Hazrat Aisha says that I went outside the camp to ease myself. When I returned and came near my halting place, where her camel with her seat, because we know that the Muslim women who used to travel, they had to travel on the camels, and they had their own seats, and it was a kind of blanket and it was covered. So if she was not inside the blanket, nobody will be able to know that she is not inside because it was covered. I noticed that my necklace had fallen down somewhere. I i went back in search for it, but in the meantime the caravan moved off and I was left behind all alone. The four carriers of the litter had placed it on my camel without noticing that it was empty. So it was a dolly like thing. If you have seen old dramas, you will see that even at the time of Mongols, or you see it in the time of Ottomans, a century or two back, or even in K dramas and C dramas, Chinese dramas, you will see that there was a kind of um, plankin which was held on the shoulders of carriers who used to carry it around, and it was covered and nobody could see who was sitting inside. So the four carriers put it back on the camel, and they did not notice that she was not inside. This happened because of my light weight due to lack of food in those days. So she was very weak because the food was very, a lot of wars were going on. There was a lot of immigration, and the food was very scarce. So she said I was very lightweight, and she was very young. I wrapped myself in my sheet and lay down in the hope that when it would be found out that I had been left behind, a search party would come back to pick me up. In the meantime, I fell asleep. In the morning, when Safwan bin Muattal Sulaimi, so he was also a Sahabi, anhu, Safwan bin Muattal Sulaimi passed that way. He saw me and recognized me, for he had seen me several times before the commandments about Parda had been sent down. So the commandments of Parda had been sent down in Surah Nur and Surah Azab, and as I have already explained, that Surah Azab came before Surah Nur, so the commandments of Parda were already there. And Ummul Momineen Hazrat Aisha anhu was uh, exercising Parda at that time. So no sooner did he see me than he stopped his camel and cried out spontaneously, "How sad! The wife of the Holy Prophet has been left here." At this I woke up all of a sudden and covered my face with my sheet. Without uttering another word, he made his camel kneel by me and stood aside. While I climbed on the camel back, he led the camel by the nose string, and we overtook the caravan at about noon, when it had just halted and nobody had yet noticed that I had been left behind. I learned later that this incident had been used to slander me, and Abdullah bin Ubay was foremost among the slanderers. According to other narrations, when Hazrat Aisha reached the camp on the camel led by Safwan, and it was known that she had been left behind, Abdullah bin Ubay cried out, "By God, she could not have remained chaste." Nauzubillah. Look, there comes the wife of the Prophet, openly on the camel led by a person with whom she passed the night. Nauzubillah. So this was the hypocrite, and this is how he targeted the Muslim women. When I reached Al Madinah, I fell ill and stayed in bed for more than a month. Though I was quite unaware of it, that what is going on outside the news of the slander was spreading like a scandal in the city and had also reached the ears of the Prophet Muhammad. Anyhow, I noticed that he did not seem as concerned about my illness as he used to be. He would come by, but without addressing me directly, would inquire from others how I was and left the house. Therefore, it troubled my mind that something has gone wrong somewhere. So I took leave of him and went to my mother's house for better nursing. So Hazrat Aisha says, while I was at my mother's house, one night I went out of the city to ease myself in company of Mista's mom, who was a first cousin of my mother. So Mista is the name of one of her cousins, and her mother was a cousin of Hazrat Aisha's mother. So what happened that as that woman was walking along, she stumbled over something and cried out spontaneously, "May Mista perish." To this I retorted, "What a good mother you are that you curse your own son, the son who took part in the battle of Badr." She replied, "My dear daughter, are you not aware of the scandal mongering When she told me everything about the campaign of the slender, beside the hypocrites, some true Muslim also have been involved in the campaign, and among them who took leading part in it was Mista, Hassan bin Sabit, and famous poet of Islam. Hassan bin Sabit was a poet of Islam, and Hamna, daughter of Jahash and sister of Hazrat Zainab bin Jahash. Hearing this horrible story, my blood curdled, and I immediately returned home and passed the rest of the night crying over it. So, the 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 slander or the targeting of the household of the Prophet ﷺ, the women, the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, was carried out in such a skilled and cunning way that even the honest Muslims, all these Muslims were very closely related to the families of the leading Islamic Sahabis and the Prophet Muhammad Muhammad's family himself. Even they were fallen. They had fallen a prey for to this slander which had been propagated masterfully. So during my absence, the Holy Prophet took counsel with Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu and Hazrat Usama bin Zaid about this matter. Usama said good words about me to this effect. He said, O Messenger of Allah, we have found nothing but good in your wife. All that is being spread about her is a lie and false. As regards Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, he said, O Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there is no dearth of women. You may, if you like, marry another wife. If, however, you would like to investigate the matter, you may send for her maidservant and inquire into it through her. Accordingly, the maidservant was sent for and questioned. She replied, I declare on oath by Allah, who has sent you with the truth, O Prophet ﷺ, that I have never seen any evil in Hazrat Aisha anha, except that she falls asleep when I tell her to look after the kneaded dough in my absence, and goat comes and eats it. So Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, we already know that he was the son of Hazrat Abu Talib and cousin of Hazrat Muhammad sallallahu, one of the earliest converts to Islam. And Hazrat Usama bin Zaid was the son of Hazrat Zaid bin Sabit, the adopted son of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, and he was the one to which Hazrat Zainab bin Jahash had been married before the Prophet sallallahu married her after her divorce from him. So he was the adopted son, very, very dear to the Prophet ﷺ, and as a result, his son Hazrat Usama was also very, very dear to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and they were considered as members of his own household. So on the same day, the Holy Prophet ﷺ addressed the people from the pulpit. Pulpit is the place of the imamat in the mosque. O Muslims, who from among you will defend my honor against the person who has transgressed all bounds in doing harm to me by slandering my wife? The Prophet ﷺ is referring to Abdullah bin Ubay. By God, I have made a thorough inquiry and found nothing wrong with her nor with the man. The man we are talking about here is Sulaimi, as I have already talked about it, Safwan Sulaimi, anhu, whose name has been linked with the slander. And this Usaid bin Hudair, or according to, so when the Prophet ﷺ said that sitting in the mosque, Usaid bin Hudair stood up and said, O Messenger of Allah, if that person belongs to our clan, because the Prophet ﷺ did not take any names, he just said that person, because everybody knew that who was leading the slander against the Prophet's household. It was Abdullah bin Ubay. But because the Prophet did not take any names, Usaid bin Hudair said, stood up and said, O Messenger of Allah, if that person belongs to our clan, we will kill him by ourselves. But if he belongs to the Khazraj clan, we will kill him if you order us to do it. So Usaid bin Hudair was from Aus tribe. And maybe he knew, maybe he didn't know that the person the Prophet ﷺ, Allah knows best, is talking about does not belong to his own tribe, Aus. Because Abdullah bin Ubay belonged to Khazraj tribe, as I've already told. Hearing this, Saad bin Ubaidah, chief of the Khazraj clan at that time, stood up and said, You lie. You can never kill him. You are saying this just because the person belonging to our clan of Khazraj. So Saad bin Ubaidah also knew that the person leading the slender was Abdullah bin Ubay, and he knew that he belonged to Khazraj. So he started into a word war with Usaid bin Hudayr, that you know that it is Abdullah bin Ubay and you know that he does not belong to your clan. That's why you are claiming that we are going to kill him if you say it. And you know that you cannot do it because he belongs to the other clan. So a kind of word war started between the two heads of the Medinan Arab tribes. Hazrat Usaid retorted, "You are a hypocrite. That is why you are defending a hypocrite." At this, there was a general turmoil in the mosque, which would have developed into a riot, even though the Holy Prophet ﷺ was present there the whole time, but he cooled down their anger and came down from the pulpit. So the mosque was filled with people from Aus and Khazraj, and when this exchange of words took place between the chiefs of the two clans, all of the people stood up, as we already know that the people of Arab were known for their tribal pride. They would not let any kind of occasion to go by without in which their tribal prestige was being attacked. They would not let that occasion go by. They would defend their tribal pride. So this exchange of words could have led to a civil war again. I've already talked that there was a civil war in Al Medina between these two tribes before the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina. There was already a civil war going on for 100 years. And now, if this had started again, the Medina would again fall into a civil war. And this is what the hypocrites and the enemy wanted. The remaining detail of the incident is cited along with the commentary on the text, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then cleared the name of Hazrat Aisha. And the ayahs of Surah Noor were revealed in order to clear the name of Hazrat Aisha. Because when the Prophet ﷺ tried to do it, the Medina it changed into an occasion where Medina could fall into a civil war. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed ayahs of Surah Noor, the initial ayahs of Surah Noor, in order to defend the honor of Hazrat Aisha anhu, and we are going to study them. But here we would only want to point out the enormity of the mischief that was engineered by Abdullah bin Ubay. It implied an attack on the honor of the Holy Prophet and Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq, because Hazrat Aisha was Hazrat Abu Bakr Siddiq's daughter and Hazrat Prophet Muhammad's wife. Abdullah bin Ubay meant to undermine the high moral superiority which was the greatest asset of Islamic movement. The Prophet, when Hazrat Aisha was asked about the character of the Prophet Muhammad, she said that his character is Quran. So whatever Quran, the commandments are laid down by the Quran, the Prophet Muhammad was a living example, a live demonstration of the commandments laid down by the Quran. So Hazrat Aisha said that his character is Quran itself. So maligning his household meant targeting his character. Abdullah bin Ubay intended to ignite civil war between the Muhajirs and the Ansars, and between Aus and Khizraj, the two clans of the Ansar. So, now I'm going to go through the salient features of the main themes of Surah Nur. So this surah was sent down to keep pure and strengthen the moral fiber of the Muslim society, which had been shaken by the enormity of the slender. We give below a summary of the commandments and instructions in their chronological order so that one may understand how the Quran makes use of this psychological occasion to reform the community by the adoption of legal, moral, and social measures. So, the different themes which are being talked about in this surah, I'm just going to enumerate them very concisely, so we can go into detail afterwards when we go through the surah. Fornication, which had already been declared to be a social crime, was now made criminal offense and was to be punished with 100 lashes. So if a man and a woman get into an extramarital relationship, an unmarried man and woman gets into an extramarital relationship, they are supposed to be punished with 100 lashes each. It was also enjoined that if a married man and women get into an extramarital relationship, they will be stoned to death. And these are Sharia laws, the had punishments. There is no excuse in these laws. Nothing, no change of circumstances can change uh, the the punishment of these crimes. So these are fixed crimes. They cannot be, they cannot, under any circumstances they cannot be removed. These are Sharia laws or had punishments, and we will go into details of them, inshallah, later. The one who accused the other of adultery but failed to produce 4 witnesses was to be punished with 80 lashes himself. The law of li'an was prescribed to decide the charge of adultery against his own wife by husband. We will do it in detail. The Muslims were enjoined to learn a lesson from the incident of slander against Hazrat Aisha, as if to say, you should be very cautious in regards to charges of adultery against the people of good reputation, and should not spread these. Nay, you should refute and suppress them immediately. So, when a rumor comes to the ear of a wise person, it dies there. It is not propagated, because rumors are like Chinese whisper. If you propagate it, you are part of the crime, the evil. So it is said, wise people say that when a rumor hits the ears of a wise person, it dies. In this connection, a general principle was enunciated that the proper spouse for a pure man is a pure woman, for he cannot pull on with a wicked woman for long. And the same is the case with a pure woman, as if to say, when you knew that the Prophet ﷺ was a pure man, the purest of all human beings, how could you believe that he had experienced happiness with a wicked woman and exalted her as the most beloved of his wives? Hazrat Muhammad ﷺ considered Hazrat Aisha the most beloved of his wives. For it was obvious that an adulterous woman would not have been able to deceive with her affected behavior a pure man like the Prophet ﷺ. You ought also to have considered the fact that the accuser was a mean person while the accused was a pure woman. This should have been enough to convince you that the accusation was not worth your consideration, nay, it was not even conceivable. So, a reprimand has been issued to the Muslims of the society, that how dare you gave time to the slander, you gave time of listening or hearing to the slander, you should have put it down immediately. Those who spread news and evil rumors and propagate wickedness in the Muslim community deserve punishment and not encouragement. So, whoever were instrumental in spreading the rumor without um, proofs, without looking for proofs, and they were spreading the rumors, they are going to be punished in the society. A general principle was laid down that relations in the Muslim community should be based on good faith. Bad gumani is not allowed, and not on suspicion. Everyone should be treated as innocent until he is proved to be guilty, and vice versa. So, bad gumani is a state of mind in which you assume that the other person has evil intent towards you. You assume it, you have no proof of it. Just because of turn of events or a single word somebody, a wicked person, an evil person has said, without investigating it and without having proof about it, you develop evil feelings for the other person. And then you act upon them. This is badgumani, and it can lead to huge problems in the societies, in the households, in the families, without proof. So the people were forbidden to enter the houses of others in uninvited and were instructed to request permission. Nobody was allowed to step into other people's house, because the other members of the household may be in a state in which they don't want to they don't want to socialize. So it's a private area, private time. Chadar and Char Diwali measures were taken by the Islamic society. Do not enter the household without permission. Both men and women were instructed to lower their gazes and forbidden to cast glances or make eyes with each other. So, when a Muslim man or a Muslim woman in passing by, even on the street out of the house, they should keep their eyes lowered rather than looking around at everyone. What is he wearing? How does he look? What is the hairstyle? What is the makeup? And instead of looking, lower your gaze while you are in the marketplace or you are outside your home doing whatever. Women were enjoined to cover their heads and breasts even inside their houses. Even inside their houses, cover your heads. The khimar should be used. Women were forbidden to appear with makeup before other men except their servants or such relatives with whom their marriage is prohibited. So mehram men were only inside, were allowed inside the houses. They were enjoined. The women were enjoined to hide their makeup when they went out of their houses and even forbidden to put on jingling ornaments while they moved out of their houses. Jingling ornaments are the ornaments which make a sound when you walk. So it can be a bracelet, it can be anklet, it can be something on your clothes or a necklace or clips, hairpins, anything. When a woman moves, it should not make any sound. And also the heels. Marriage was encouraged and enjoined even for slave and slave girls, for unmarried people helped spread indecency. The institution of slavery was discouraged, and the owners and other people were enjoined to give financial help to the slaves to earn their freedom under the law of Mokatabat. Prostitution by the slave girls was forbidden in the first stance, for prostitution in Arabia was confined to these class only, the slave girls. This, in fact, implied the legal prohibition of prostitution. Sanctity of privacy in home life was enjoined even for servants and underage children, including one's own. They were enjoined not to enter the private rooms of any man or woman without permission, especially in the morning, noon, and night. Old women were given the concession that they could set aside their head covers within their houses but should refrain from display of ornaments. Even they were told that it was better for them to keep themselves covered with head wrappers. The blind, lame, crippled, and sick persons were allowed to take any article of food from the houses of other people without permission, for it was not to be treated like theft and cheating, which was recognizable offenses. On the other hand, the Muslims were encouraged to develop mutual relationships by taking their meals together. And the near and the nearest relatives and the intimate friends were allowed to take their meals in each other's houses without any formal invitation. So the mahram relations. This was to produce mutual affection and sincere relationships between them to counteract any future mischief. Side by side with these instructions, clear signs of the believers and the hypocrites were stated to enable every Muslim to discriminate between the two. At the same time, the community was bound together by adopting disciplinary measures in order to make it stronger and firmer than it was at the time, so as to discourage the enemies from creating mischief. So, the most important aspect about this discourse is that it is free from the bitterness which inevitably follows such shameful and absurd attacks. Instead of showing any wrath at this provocation, the discourse of the story prescribes some laws and regulations and orders reformative commandments and issues wise instructions that were required at the time for the education and training of the community. Incidentally, this teaches us how to deal with such provocative mischiefs coolly, wisely, and generously. So, in such circumstances, instead of becoming a hothead, cool down and use wisdom. At the same time, it is a clear proof that these were not the words of the Prophet ﷺ. Surah Nur is not a word of Prophet ﷺ, but of the Creator Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is observing all human conditions and affairs and guiding His creation without any personal prejudices, feelings, and leanings. So, The Prophet ﷺ was a human, and he was accused that Quran was his personal design or his personal creation. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the 13 years of Makkah had been continuously in almost every surah has been saying that this Quran comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Had this been the word of the Holy Prophet, there would have been at least some tinge of natural bitterness in spite of his great generosity and patience. For it is but human that are but for it is but human that a noble man naturally becomes enraged when his own honor is attacked in this mean way.